lot of power in a name. Amen?
Amen.
And today we read of Jesus defining himself. And how does he define himself? By asking how others define him. This connects so perfectly to our second reading from the letter of James that says, our faith is dead without works. In other words, if we don't do something about what we believe and what we proclaim to believe, we've not really believed much at all, have we? How many of us have ever heard namaste used before? Do we know what that means, literally? The God or the divine in me acknowledges the God or the divine in you. And how beautiful is it that today Peter and the other disciples recognize the divine in Jesus. How and why did they come to this conclusion? Well, let's take a look at what's led up to this point. Prior to this reading in Mark, this part of Mark's gospel, we see that Jesus has healed people. He's went out and taught and preached amongst those who were cast out. He's been with those he was not supposed to be with. He's done what he was not supposed to do. And our reading from Isaiah tells us why. The suffering servant is often how we describe this poetic structure of Isaiah. And the suffering servant is this prophesied figure who will come and suffer and serve only to ultimately die. And Jesus, when identified by Peter, is called what? The Christ. The Christ. Do we know the Hebrew word for the word we translate as Christ? Messiah or Messiah. The Messiah was supposed to come and liberate. The Messiah was supposed to be a military figure. The Messiah was not supposed to die. And yet Jesus says that's exactly what's going to happen. Jesus scares everybody. Jesus tells Peter to be quiet and to not reveal who and what they know him to be. There's a lot of power in a name. And there's a lot of power in identity. And when he says, who do you say that I am? He's not telling you who he is he? How did they come to this? Well, we just talked about it. What he did. So in our coming weeks and months, in our own faith journeys, I would encourage us to ask that question. Who do you say that I am? It's important to ask other people how they define you, not because you're defined by other people, but because it gives you an insight into how others perceive you. And this perception can tell us a lot about areas that we need to improve on. Amen. If we proclaim a faith of service, of love, of inclusion, of welcoming, and yet we don't walk the walk, who are we? Who do you say that I am if I am not welcoming? Who do you say that I am if I am not living my faith? Who do you say that I believe in if I'm not loving as he called me to? St. Francis de Sales once said, to paraphrase him, that gossip is a poison of the soul. Amen. It's so easy to get drawn in because one of the many realities of the human condition is that we like to create those that are in and those that are out. And it makes us really feel super good when we're in. And when we're talking about those that are out. When we're putting them down to lift ourselves up. Jesus wouldn't even tell you he was the Messiah in Mark's gospel. He wanted you to figure it out for yourself. Jesus wanted you to know who he was by his actions. Instead of talking the talk, he wanted to walk the walk. And so this week, why don't we take it upon ourselves to walk the walk, to allow our faith to be known by what we do? I would encourage us to evaluate the ways that we are spending our time. Have you ever thought about the reality that of the 24 hours in a day, at most, you're probably up, if you're not getting great sleep, 18 or 19 of them. And a lot of those hours you're spending, getting ready for the day, eating, not doing super intricate stuff. There's only about 4 to 6 hours in a day where we really choose what we can do, beyond the things we have to do. And of those, we often want to do something that's fun, and no blame there. So we really just have 1 or 2 hours a day at most to do something we 100% choose to do, beyond having fun, beyond our chores, beyond our obligations. So let's think of those 7 to 14 hours a week we get where we choose something. Let's try to choose relationship with God and others. Let's try to take a minute and say a prayer. We often consider ourselves faithful. I think everyone here does. But how faithful to God in terms of engaging in relationship are we in a week? I'm a priest, and I'll tell you, sometimes I don't spend that much time. I find excuses during the week, right? It's natural. But let's commit ourselves this week to spending at least half of our free hours either loving God or loving our neighbor, thereby loving God. If we can commit ourselves to a couple of prayers a week, a couple of acts of kindness a week, we'll commit ourselves to a faith that walks the walk. Amen? Amen.